Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. I've got Cami here with me this evening. Cami, it's always a pleasure to have a good conversation with you.
Hopefully my brain will be ready to have this conversation. It's buzzing from this this preparation.
Look, we've been having a very good year over here on the channel, and we've been doing a lot of great projects. But amongst the Ultimate Journeys and Ice Cream Man by the Scoop, we can't neglect some of the other things that we do over here on this channel. And one of these things that we actually don't really get to do as frequently as things used to be is a DC animated live show. So this is a segment on this channel that is very near and dear to my heart because of the fact that this was something that I started on my own personal channel. I still review all the new animated movies that come out from the DC animation world on my regular channel. But the live show was a great project that started because I got an opportunity to talk to people about these truly wonderful animated films. It started with my friend Brian from Brian Lomax Movie Talk. And then when he rode off into the sunset, Cami was gracious enough to dive headfirst, as she normally does, into something new and exciting. And she and I have been doing this ever since, and bringing it to this channel is really nice. And because of the fact that there really hasn't been that many new animated films coming out from DC, and that's whether you want to go with the Zaslav theory, go at it, whatever you want, or the James Gunn theory, whatever works for you. But I figured that this was a segment on the channel that wasn't ready to go yet. And I thought it would be a good idea. As a matter of fact, this really was Cami's suggestion. Let's go back and take a look at some of these other films in this library, because it would be great to revisit, great to talk about, but more importantly, for Cami's sake, see some of these movies for the first time. So we are doing a series of DC animated recordings over the next couple of months or so. I don't know how often we will have them, but we thought that it would be cool to visit the fan favorite, or maybe cult favorite, I don't know. I enjoy them. It's the timeline that is dubbed the DC Universe New 52 timeline. As far as I'm concerned, this was pretty much the right answer for DC for the Marvel MCU that was going on the big screen at the time. It came out right in the heart of the Infinity Saga, and as much as I enjoy the MCU movies, I will say that when it comes to this DC animation New 52 timeline, I think this one is much better when it comes to its craft. We'll get into those details as we progress in these videos, but now that I've said my piece, Cami, I'm really hoping that you are looking forward to seeing this saga unfold for the very first time for you. I mean, I know that you've seen a couple of these films, but now I'm really excited to see what will happen when you see the entire saga as a whole, starting with the first three films that we're going to be discussing today.
Well, the three films we're discussing today, this was the first time I've seen all of these.
Right. Yeah. So we're not necessarily going to be going in chronological order of releases. This is a very interesting timeline of films, and as someone who has collected them and watched a couple of these films numerous times, I thought the right thing to do is to divide it up in the best way possible. So what I thought we should do today is start with the initial Justice League trilogy of this film series. So it's the first three films that have Justice League in the title. The next ones that we're going to go into is going to be what I call the Batman trilogy, because it's three Batman stories. But today we wanted to start off with the prequel, so to speak, because believe it or not that many people knew that Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox, was the prologue to the New 52 storyline. technically, the second film in this group of films, Justice League War, is the first installment of the New 52 timeline. But we're going to do the right thing by the fans and by ourselves for the sake of our sanities and start with Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox. Loosely, yeah.
I'm so glad I started with that one. And maybe it was the way you just typed it out for me to watch it. Maybe my brain just went that way. But had I watched it in any other sequence than what I watched it, I would have been highly confused. So I think I'm
Yeah.
okay.
So, Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox, um, not entirely, but definitely, along with this entire saga, is based on the New 52 universe that was actually created by DC in the early 2000s. It was supposed to be, in the world of comics, a reinvention of all of these classic heroes for a modern audience. It didn't do so well, believe it or not. There were some that hit, and then there were some that failed miserably, and some that started off really rough and picked up and became some of the best comics that some people have ever read. But Flashpoint Paradox is based on Jeff Johns' acclaimed miniseries Flashpoint, just Flashpoint, which is basically where Barry Allen, aka the Flash, wants to fix something that has plagued him throughout his entire life because he actually believes that it was his fault, and that was the death of his mother, Nora, when he was very young. So he wanted to he finally came to the decision that he wants to save her. So he goes back in time and saves her, and the butterfly effect that is created from the saving of his mother is not exactly what he wanted. So that's basically what makes the comic book series similar to this movie. This movie has a couple of additional pieces specifically for cinematic value, but they work as far as I'm concerned. And where this movie starts is we're basically thrown right into the main DC universe where Barry is having a date night with his wife, Iris. And then he gets the call that there's trouble at the Flash Museum, and he encounters his infamous rogues. Characters that can look so over the top goofy, but oh boy, are they no joke. Some people still think they might be, but I loved that sequence because we got to see some of his best villains alongside the Justice League who comes to help the Flash, and we see a lot of great, great heroes.
Yeah, this one actually brought on some characters that I wasn't familiar with, so that was kind of cool to see. Like Batman's father, and there was just some elements of this that I wasn't accustomed to from the comic standpoint. And I know animation and comics are vastly different because you can't always pull from the pages onto the screen and vice versa. But this, I think, for a newbie would be very hard to follow. So if you are just stepping into the world of DC animation, I don't suggest starting here unless you want to start with the new world because
Yeah.
there's a lot happening in Flashpoint Paradox. It was kind of just, it was a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of what was, what is, what's to come. There was just, I felt like a lot of sequences were so back and forth so quickly, though it was almost sometimes hard to follow. Luckily, I was very familiar with Barry Allen, his backstory. I was alluding with you before we stepped on to film this today, that I think having watched the Flash live movie that recently came out really helped me a lot to kind of understand his thought process, and just how important his mom was to him, and how much weight he carried with the burden of her passing, and how much he felt like it was his fault. And then there's a scene in that live movie where he kind of gets trapped in his own thoughts, where he's kind of been kind of going back and forth trying to make it work. But as we all know, time travel doesn't work because you touch something, you alter something, and then it forever changes the ripple effect of something else. And so no matter how perfect you try to make it, or how seemingly cohesive you try to make it to just carry on where you inevitably think it stopped, it changes something somewhere for someone else. And so I think that was probably the most powerful thing that I pulled out of Flashpoint Paradox was that, although the gesture was selfish, and although Barry thought, my world would be better, the world in itself would be better if my mom was here, if I could just change that moment, look at how catastrophic it was for the entire universe, and that was really epic. That was something I definitely was just very overwhelmed with. And I think for me, the most poignant part of this entire film was that conversation that Batman's father has with him. Oh, I'm sorry, not Batman. It's his alter ego, Thawne, that has with him. And when he's like, you know, how am I the villain in this situation? You went back and you changed something. You went back and you made a decision to bring your mom back, and it changed everything. You could have stopped the assassination of JFK. You could have made sure Hitler finished art school, but yet your most important point was to save your mom because you have you miss mommy, and I'm the bad guy. I'm the villain in all this. And I stopped dead in my tracks when they had that conversation. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never thought of that before. How many
Yeah.
times has Barry Allen went back in time trying to save his mom and alter the situation? And never once has he considered changing something else that might benefit the rest of the world. And it just really makes you think about the selfish decisions that we make that we think in the moment are so innocent, but have such a catastrophic ripple effect.
It's
That
not
really
just
stuck
that.
with me in this film.
It's not just that. It's also because of the fact that when you take a look at the history of specifically Barry Allen, the Flash, and someone who has dived deep into DC Comics history and saw a lot of stuff involving Barry Allen, Barry Allen is one of the kindest and most giving heroes in the MCU. But when you take a look at the story of Flashpoint Paradox, you're absolutely right. When the Reverse Flash or Zoom, he has multiple names, Eobard Thawne, but I always like to call him the Reverse Flash. He hit it right on the nose. He basically said you could have done so many different things, and yet because you missed your mom, you just skewed everything just a little bit. And what exactly did he skew? The bullet didn't hit Thomas and Martha Wayne. It hit Bruce Wayne, and it caused Thomas Wayne to become a very different Batman, and it made Martha Wayne into the Joker, which was even scarier if you didn't
Yeah,
even
that was
realize that
freaky. No, I did. When she
Superman's
started
space shuttle did not
laughing.
crash in Smallville, Kansas. It crashed right in the middle of Metropolis, which basically prevented the world from having a guardian like Superman. Flash didn't get his powers. And of course, probably the one thing that is the most brutal part of this new reality is the fact that there is a war on the other side of the world between the Amazons and the Atlanteans because of a selfish act that Diana and Arthur decided to do.
That was
And
a dark war too. That was
well,
really hard to
yeah,
watch. I mean,
yes.
we all know that Wonder Woman is really she's very forceful, but I don't think I've ever seen that dark side of her, and I felt like she was so dark in this film.
Well, that's one of the few things that I want to touch upon in regards to this movie. One of the few reasons why this is one of my favorite films in the DC animated library is because of the fact that they pushed the bar. Like, they really made it
Really
a
pushed.
very in your face, very action packed, very violent movie. I mean, the one scene in that movie that always makes me so emotional is when Grifter is killed. When Grifter is shot multiple times and just dies, it's one of the most horrible things. When Cyborg is killed, it just crushes me. Or how fearless and how terrifying Wonder Woman can be when she kills Billy Batson. It's just unbelievable how this world can create such brutal characters out of these heroes that we know and love. And I appreciate the fact that DC animation did not hold back, because I am always on my soapbox when it comes to the MCU films, talking about how they could have gone so much deeper in this film, and yet they pulled back and told a joke. And that's another thing that I really like about this film, as well as the other films. I really appreciate that if they're gonna throw some comedy into these movies, the timing is good and the joke is tasteful. And that's one of the few reasons why I love these specific animated films. I mean, the animation is definitely a little bit something getting used to. It looks a little manga-ish, anime-ish, if you think about it. But sometimes it looks a little choppy. But
Mhm.
overall, I love this film just because of the directions that it goes in. I really, really do appreciate that.
And it's odd because I think normally when we sit down and we have these discussions about DC animated films, I gravitate to the dark. I really love when DC goes dark, but here it just was very unsettling to me. And I don't know if it was just because of it was some of my beloved characters, it was my Justice League that they were kind of picking apart, but it was a tough one for me to get through, just to see, like I said, the dark side of Wonder Woman when she murders Mara, that was very intense. What she does to Aquaman, I mean, she really pulls out this alter ego of Aquaman. He's just this like ravenous, just vengeful person. And so a lot of these characters that we have grown to love because of them saving the world, they're at odds with each other and they're battling each other and they're battling their own demons in a way. And I don't know, my headspace was just in a really weird place. It was like I wanted to love all of the darkness, but my other half of my brain was saying, no, this is wrong.
Well,
There's
again,
something awful.
that's why people praise Jeff Johns so much. It's because of when he wrote that original comic, how dark he went
It
and
was,
how
yeah.
dark the world of DC storytelling could get. But again, the times when they do pull a little bit back and do make and then again, I think that's another reason why you were having a tough time with it is because when you see those opening sequences and you see all the heroes and you see their true good-natured sides, you get a little upset because you see that. I mean, I still say that one of the best parts of the movie is when Wonder Woman takes Captain Cold out into the wilderness to disarm the bomb, and she's about to freeze his waist, and she goes, "I'd suck it in if I were you." Like that's a great line. I love that line.
No, you're absolutely right with the comedic touches. I feel like all the comedic banter back and forth was perfectly timed. I think the jokes were spot on. It wasn't too much over the top. It wasn't trying too hard. And I think it was exactly what we needed to kind of just bring us back into our Justice League, the characters that we know and love. Because it does at times get really dark. It does at times kind of make you forget for a moment that they were once a team, and to see them so brutally pulled apart here. It is genius writing, it is genius animation. I wouldn't say it's the strongest animation. I mean, you did allude to earlier, it does look a little choppy. I wasn't a fan
Mm-hmm.
completely of the artwork, but I think sometimes you look for a storyline, you don't always look for the artwork or the animation so much. But here I had a hard time seeing my beloved characters at odds with each other in so many
Yeah.
ways.
It's an acclaimed story, though. And again, I just appreciate that they brought it to animation because you can do so much with animation. This would have not have, I don't think that this movie would have done as eh, provided such an impact if it was live action. I just don't think that it would have worked. Also, you got to give props to the voice cast. I don't know if you paid attention to some of the actors that were chosen by Andrea Romano. I mean, thank God she was still there at the time and she gave us such amazing voices. I mean, C. Thomas Howell, famous teen heartthrob from the 80s. He was the Reverse Flash. He was fantastic. I will say my favorite voice in that film is the voice of Aquaman. It's the great Cary Elwes, and he is so good. You see, that's another thing that I love about this movie because this is made at the time when the whole Aquaman is a joke kind of thing is floating around. And then you see an Aquaman like this, and you see
Yeah.
he is no joke. And I really appreciate. See, that's one of the few things I love about DC animation. They want you to feel that every single hero in that world is relevant. Going all the way back to when Bruce Timm was making Batman the Animated Series, what did he do? He gave us Robin, but he didn't give us the Adam West Burt Ward Robin. He didn't give us the George Clooney Chris O'Donnell Robin. No, he gave us a Robin with a serious side, a lighthearted side, but a Robin that can truly live in a dark world like Batman's. And then we get this and then we get characters like the Flash and Aquaman as the stories progress. Again, when he made Superman the animated series, it's bright and it's colorful and it's beautiful, but he gave a real serious, real vulnerable side to Superman, and that's why DC animation has been as impactful and as strong as it has been. So to give us very serious moments with a character like Aquaman showing how powerful he is, showing us how strong he really is. I appreciated seeing a dark Aquaman like that because that's what I think about Aquaman. I think of a hero, but I know that this is not just a guy who talks to fish. This is a threat to evil. This is a strong hero who needs to be taken seriously.
And you, sir, are a true Aquaman fan because this is not the version of Aquaman that I love. I love, a much brighter, a happier, cheerier kind of Aquaman. When I think of Aquaman, I kind of think of him more of that land meets sea. So by the time he gets to Atlantis and by the time he kind of takes over power from his mom, I don't see him as this dark force of evil to be reckoned with. I see him as kind of someone who's still fumbling through the idea of being a leader and what is it to be a leader? What is it to know your Atlanteans? What is it to lead a civilization that is lost? So I don't see him in the portrayal that we get to see in this version of Flash Paradox. I think he's extremely established, and maybe this is kind of like a future-esque version of maybe what Aquaman could become. Once he's invested in his power and he's been at the helm for a while. But again, it's a really hard sell for me. I like the orange and aqua version of Aquaman, not the red and gray version of Aquaman. And to each his own. And I think you giving us variations of Robin also kind of plant some different images in my head of characters as we are given different standpoints from various creators, whether that's from a writing standpoint or from an animation standpoint. We always get different versions of these characters that we identify with, that we lock into. And so in a way, those characters are what is kind of going to stay with us, and those are the characters that we're going to latch onto when we see them again, because we're going to be like, oh, this is the version of Batman that I love, this is the version of Joker that I love. And I think that as we explore these things, there are versions that we can also not love, and that even though that we're fans of these characters, we can just kind of say that was a bit too much. And I think for me, this version of Aquaman and Wonder Woman was a bit too much.
Okay, but again, I see exactly where you're coming from. I really do. But again, I just love the fact that it was a very dark, very gritty film, and I mean, at the end, we get exactly what we want. The fact that the Flash is able to stop himself from causing the butterfly effect and go back to his world. But even when he goes back to his world has changed a little bit. I mean, one of the few things, I don't know if you noticed, the last scene in the film, which is a very touching scene, by the way, and we get Kevin Conroy as Batman in this movie too, which is absolutely wonderful. Before we get a whole new voice for the very first time voicing Batman in the next film in Jason O'Mara. But the fact that Barry is able to bring Thomas's letter to Bruce, so Bruce can actually hear some final words from his dad, is extremely touching. And I love the line. It's like you see Batman cry, And then he goes, Barry, you are one hell of a messenger. Like, I love that line. It's wonderful. And then Flash officially has started a brand new storyline, and we officially get into the DC New 52 animated storyline.
Yeah, that particular piece where he's able to bring Bruce the letter was extremely touching. As a fan of Batman, I was just really touched to see that. To actually see him produce tears was really touching. But yeah, for me in that moment, it was like, oh, this is how Alan always feels, you know, because he at some point gets to touch base with his mom in one of his alternate realities. And so to see that same opportunity afforded to Bruce Wayne was super cool.
All right. And another thing that is very similar to the MCU films is the fact that these films come with post-credit scenes. And we get a very interesting post-credit scene at the end of Flashpoint Paradox. And I think what's really funny is I didn't even know that there was a post-credit scene in this movie when I first bought it and watched it. I actually found out much later saying, oh, you really should know that there's a post-credit scene in this movie. And what is that post-credit scene? You see space, a boom tube opens up, and Darkseid's parademons are pouring out. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, I know exactly where we're going here. And that's where we get into Justice League War. So Justice
Yeah.
League War, again, this and the next Justice League film in Justice League Throne of Atlantis are all based on stories that take place in Jeff Johns' New 52 Justice League run. A much more modern, more lively, more intense take on the Justice League, because one of the interesting things about Justice League in about this version of the Justice League in Justice League War is, yeah, they team up, but they're not too fond of one another.
Yeah. So this movie was intense. Not as intense as Flash Paradox, but I think that having just come off of that, it definitely set the story up. I knew exactly what was, you know, transpiring. I was excited. Anytime Darkseid is on screen, it's like, yes. And those monsters, those box monsters were just so intense because there was just so much going on with their component. And I love that it took Cyborg a minute to kind of figure it out, you know, what's going on here, how do I communicate with this, and it just it gives you that feeling of dread that is there something that can finally defeat the Justice League.
Well, we're jumping the gun here. I really want to touch on all the little things that we get before we get to the war with Darkseid. So I appreciate that you're really into this, which is great. But so the first encounter that we get is we get Green Lantern meeting Batman for the first time. And oh man, is that fun. I love their banter. I think, again, good jokes, tasteful at the right moment when they're in the sewer, and then all of a sudden Batman goes, "What is this?" And he's holding Green Lantern's power ring, and then Green Lantern turns back into Hal Jordan, and he goes, looks like it works on concentration. He goes, "How did you get it?" He goes, "You weren't concentrating." I love that joke. It's beautiful. I mean,
Batman's humor in that entire film is just probably
I
some of the
love it.
best Batman humor I've ever witnessed. It
I love it. So this
was
is also, I think, the
fantastic.
very first time that you actually experience Jason O'Mara as
Mhm.
Batman. So as someone who loves Batman the Animated Series, who thinks that Kevin Conroy is the greatest Batman that ever lived, it's always scary when a new voice actor or actor takes up the helm of voicing Batman. I mean, I still remember when Batman Under the Red Hood came out, because this came out a couple of years prior. I was a little bit more excited just because of the fact that I am a big fan of Bruce Greenwood. I love him. I think he's one of my favorite character actors. So I was excited to see him as Batman. However, now here's an actor that I have no idea who this is. So I was a little bit scared. But you know what? What I really appreciate is a lot of these voice actors know how much people love Kevin Conroy. So they don't necessarily want to give you exactly Kevin Conroy, but they want you to feel comfortable saying, I may not be Kevin Conroy, but I'm going to give you the best Kevin Conroy like Batman that I can give you. That's what I think these voice actors do now moving forward.
Well, and then also there's only one Kevin Conroy. You can't be hired on to take on a part and expect to completely embody the actor that or actress that came before you. You have to be able to stand confident in your own abilities. And I think every character actor that is able to voice one of our beloved characters brings a different side, a different element, a different layer to them. And so I think for me with him, it was definitely that comedic side. He just did it very well. It was so dry, but it was like a great martini. It was just perfect at all the right times.
And what do
So
you think
it
of
was
Green
good.
Lantern? And what do you think of Green
So
Lantern?
Green Lantern took me a minute. I'm not gonna lie. So when you alluded to, you loved him right from the jump and their banter. He was a little bit juvenile for me at first,
He
and I
was
was like,
very
"Is this what
cocky.
he's gonna do?" Yes. And I was a little bit concerned that he was just gonna joke the entire film. And then we kind of get, and I know you hate for me to jump ahead, but we kind of get that feeling at the end of the film when they're like, "Oh, he's good for the wrap up," or the
Yeah,
cleanup or something
absolutely.
like
He's
that.
very you
And I
see,
was like,
it was a little hard for me to really enjoy this Green Lantern because you don't understand. Green Lantern is my favorite DC comic book
I
hero.
know,
And you can
I
probably
know.
see that if you see all of those Ultimate Journeys that we're talking about. Green Lantern can be a little full of himself,
Yeah.
but he's not an asshole. And in this
He's
movie, he is a
he's not.
royal asshole.
I wouldn't say a royal asshole, but he's definitely like me, me, me. He wants to be in the spotlight, and that's what I was so worried about. Obviously, he's going to be a prominent part of the storyline. So, are we going to just get these obnoxious, all about me jokes for the entire duration of this film? And it didn't end up being that way. I think it ended up kind of softening all of the banter between other characters, and it was kind of a breath of fresh air in some regards. Again, not my favorite, but I did grow to appreciate the Green Lantern kind of midway point on this movie. He was not my favorite starting off, though. I was
Yeah, because
ready to punch him
again,
in the throat.
DC animation pushes the bar where Marvel doesn't. I'm not gonna lie. When I first saw this movie after I first purchased it, my jaw hit the floor when Hal called Bruce a phenomenal douchebag. I was like, whoa! I have never heard that word said in an animated film. That was crazy to me.
In this and the next one we're going to talk about, the Throne of Atlantis, there were a couple liners that I was like, whoa, DC, you're really pushing the bar here with
But that's
some of these
why
phrases. These are
eventually these movies would become rated R, which is a good thing.
it is a very good thing because these are definitely not made for children movies. There were a couple lines that were said by a few characters along the way that really just kind of kept pushing the envelope, so to speak. But I think that in a way, that's what adult comic book readers need when we kind of push our books to the screen is what are these characters capable of. They're not always going to be cookie cutter. They're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be they're grown adults. They're going to curse. They're going to do things that are crass and rude and just unexpected and that are annoying. That's human elements. That's just part of what we do as human beings and human interaction. So to see these characters do some of those things in front of us is kind of refreshing, even though it's not always our cup of tea. So
Yeah.
I think I do enjoy DC kind of pushing the bar a little bit.
So, what did you think of the version of Wonder Woman we got?
Okay, so I love her, but it took me about, I would say, three-quarters of the film to actually appreciate her.
She kind of felt
I
like, to me at the beginning, she kind of felt like a big child, especially when she eats
Oh,
the
thank
ice cream.
you. Yes. Oh, that scene was just cringe. Oh my God. I'm
I
like,
was,
yeah.
they
Oh,
did
please
it
put
better.
the
They
ice cream back.
actually did that
Don't ever
exact
eat ice
same
cream.
scene in the Wonder Woman film and did it better in that film, by the way, when she has ice
Okay.
cream for the first time.
In this animated version though, it is so cringe. I hated her for 3/4 of the film. This is not my Wonder Woman. This was such a childlike version of her in her dialogue, in her mannerisms, and I'm quite frankly, just easy to say, annoying. She was a very annoying character. I think that I what was he, the mayor or the governor, when they had kind of that town gathering and he
Yeah,
kind of was calling her out about the way she was superheroing was dead on. She was just very in your face and all about her, all about self, and look at me save the world. That is not Wonder Woman's persona. That is not her MO at all. So to have her portrayed like this to me was extremely odd and very awkward as a viewer. And for me to have to wait, more than halfway through a DC animated film to even appreciate the character, it wasn't until the Justice League really like formed and was working together that I was like, okay, there's my Wonder Woman. It's still not 100%, but there she is. And for a character to take that long to develop, that's a lot to ask on an audience.
yeah, and and I could say something not entirely the same as you, but that's a little bit about how I felt about Superman.
Yeah, and
Superman in this movie, this
Superman
first
too. Yes.
again, this was exactly how he was portrayed in the New 52 comic books. And a lot of people did not like the way he was written in those books until the very end when Peter Tomasi and Dan Jurgens took over those Superman books and gave us an amazing end to that New 52 title. But he is not the big blue Boy Scout in this movie. He's got an attitude. He is brash. I mean, I will definitely say in this movie, he is voiced by Alan Tudyk, who is a great actor. He would eventually, in the next movie, and as for the rest of the DC New 52 films, he would be voiced by Jerry O'Connell. As a matter of fact, Rosario Dawson didn't even voice her Wonder Woman in this movie. I believe that was Michelle Moynihan who voiced her in this movie. Rosario Dawson would take over later, but no, this version of Superman, I mean, I will definitely say I sort of smirked when Superman first shows up and holds Batman in his hands and goes, "So, what can you do?" Like, I sort of thought that was funny, but yeah, it was really hard for me to get into this version of Superman because, again, edgy, brash, understanding that it's supposed to fit this new 52 atmosphere, but man, he was tough to get used to.
Yeah, there was just something off about him. Not the Superman we know and love, not the Superman I love. I don't feel like he was a very confident superhero for at least a good half the movie. It just seemed like he was very clumsy, and I don't mean that in the literal sense, in just that it seemed like almost the character was looking for the character, if that makes any sense. Like he couldn't find himself, he couldn't find his rhythm. And so that paired with a really odd Wonder Woman, it was a lot to take on for the first
Especially
half of the movie,
considering the fact that one of the few things that actually does take place in the films is another thing that takes place in the comic books that a lot of fans did not like. And that is the fact that Wonder Woman and Superman become an item. We'll get into that when we get into Throne of
Okay.
Atlantis. There are a few other characters that we're introduced to. It's like you completely forget the Flash is in this movie, even though he's the reason why we are where we are. But I really don't know what to say about him. I will definitely say I think that surprisingly, Shazam gets a lot more screen time. And this is no different than the Shazam that we all know and love. This is exactly the way he's supposed to be. Sean Astin voiced him in this film, and it's wonderful. I love Shazam in this movie. I think that he is exactly what we need in terms of lightheartedness, in terms of charm, and especially in terms of comic relief. And I love his relationship with Cyborg. I love how when Victor is at his lowest of lows, it is going to be Billy that brings him back up and says, "Man, you're a hero. You can be great. Don't forget about what happened to you." He's like, "You are Victory Stone." I love that about those two.
I think Shazam is definitely the lifeblood of this film. And Shazam is never going to be my favorite character. I will always say he's the most juvenile, but he's a kid. I mean, at the end of the day,
Exactly.
that is who Shazam is. So I have to remind myself that as I'm seeing this adult version of him, like encased in that superhero as a little boy, you know. So I kind of throw off a little bit of his jokes and stuff that I think are a little, you know, just silly, but that's what a kid would be, you know. But yes, you're absolutely right. The dynamic of the relationship between Cyborg and Shazam in this is just brilliant. It really carries that story all the way home, and you just kind of see everything unfold, and it helps you kind of forget those forgettable characters like Wonder Woman and Superman, you know, even though they're very prominent in the film, being that they're not their best versions of themselves, it really does make a cohesive tie-in to, okay, we're here for the Justice League. Let's just focus on the good parts of the Justice League in this film. And I think for me with the Flash, you know, although he's not a standout in this film, his comedic touch is still very much there in this film. You know,
Yeah.
when he does pop on screen, he's funny, he's charismatic, he's kind, he's lovable, and he doesn't ever make me feel like he doesn't belong in a scene. And
Yeah.
so I think for that, Flash gets bonus points, you know,
Yeah.
because there are many there are many points I will deduct from Wonder Woman and Superman in this film for just being who they are.
Yeah, Flash is definitely and Flash is definitely the ultimate fanboy in this movie. Like he is just so humble to be around these people. I think that's the best. I think his favorite line is, "Wait, Batman's here!" Like he couldn't believe that Batman was actually there. Like because that's what's also
Yeah.
really interesting because this movie is supposed to take place at a time where these characters as heroes are not yet established because that's the interesting thing. Wonder Woman is meeting with the president of the United States because we're living in a world where there suddenly are all of these metahumans and everyone fears them. Nobody knows who they are, nobody knows what their purpose is. But of course, we find that out very much so in this film, as we did in the original comics, because what happens? What is their first mission that brings them together as a team is the fact that the parademons will eventually bring their leader to Earth to conquer it. And it, of course, is Darkseid right there on day one. And that is definitely what shakes a lot of people up when it comes to the source material as well as the movie. I will say the sequence and the battle with Darkseid is definitely great. I mean, I love the fact that while they're fighting Darkseid, they're literally learning how to become a team on the fly. So they fail numerous times and they get back up numerous times. It's a very real, very relatable type of thing because, again, it's not the Avengers. If you've seen, I'm sure you have seen the classic 2012 Avengers. They literally come together as a team like that with no hesitation and no conflict whatsoever when they're fighting the Battle of New York. All of their squabbles seem to have been done when they're in the Shield headquarters, and to a certain degree, that's okay, but you'd expect them not to do so great in the heat of battle when they never actually fought together before as a team. And that's what you get with this version of the Justice League. They pick them, they get knocked down, they dust themselves off, they get back, they come with a plan, they save the day.
Well, and I think that's what also makes for me the Justice League so relatable is that they're very much human. You know, they will be very public and open with their disdain for one another. You know, you hear Cyborg allude to, well, we're really not this Justice League that you've created in your mind, you know. But I think the great thing is like you said, we're watching them kind of create this league behind closed doors in the open. You know, it's like a behind the scenes in your face, and it's great because it's a story within a story in a way. We're watching this epic battle, but we're also watching this assemination of this great powerful superhero team, and we're also watching them kind of work through their flaws too, and it's really cool to watch.
Yeah. So they save the day. We get to the end. They're being praised and thanked, and they still don't even know if they want to be a team anymore. Shazam clearly does because he calls themselves the Super Seven, and that was actually very funny.
Hilarious. Oh my god, I laughed so hard, and it was a great intro also to the next film we're going to discuss.
Yep.
We'll get to that in a few, but I absolutely love that part, and the fact that they're all kind of behind the press conference like, really, dude, don't call us that. Please don't call us that.
And it's not just that.
It
They
was
still,
great.
and that's not just that. They still don't want to work with each other. I mean, Green
They
Lantern
don't.
definitely
Yeah.
shows that he does not want to be a part of this team.
No, yeah, they're still very ununited in that moment, and they're just trying to, put on a brave face because they're in a press conference and they want to be appreciative for the fact that they're appreciated for the first time as who they really are. But yeah, I mean, they're still very much undecisive as to whether or not they can work together. And I think that's funny. That is classic DC humor. And the fact that Shazam is kind of the one running the show in that regard is just brilliant. I love the ending
Yeah.
of this
So
film.
we get into the third installment here. It's the final installment of the Justice League trilogy, and that is Justice League Throne of Atlantis, once again based on the Jeff Johns Justice League comic storyline of the same name. Very different from the film, by the way, I will definitely say. But clearly, if you're going to have a Justice League, especially if you're going to want to base it on the new 52, you cannot have the Justice League without Aquaman. And Throne of Atlantis, clearly, they're going to give you a whole Aquaman story. And again, I love that. Jeff Johns is clearly an Aquaman fan. He wrote the Aquaman solo New 52 stories, and a lot of people liked his Aquaman run. But clearly, Aquaman, again, a character that has not been taken seriously for many, many years. There are people out there who love this character, who want to make this character strong, want to make him relevant, want to make him relatable, want to make him vulnerable. And that's what we get in Throne of Atlantis. Unfortunately, I will say that Throne of Atlantis is definitely the weakest of the three for certain reasons. But watching this movie for the first time in a long time, I did enjoy it a lot more than I used to. But I will definitely say, what is it about this movie that drags it down? It's the villain. The villain is just a
Horrible.
bratty, spoiled kid with
Child.
mommy issues.
Yes. He was hard. He was hard to watch. He was hard to This whole movie was, in my mind, very forgettable because it was my least favorite of this trilogy that we watched. It was a very weak storyline, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, when you are thinking of this epic war that potentially could be created between Atlanteans and, these creatures that we, for most of the movie, don't know exactly what they are. Are they Atlanteans that are, bottom feeders? Are they from the land? There's a lot of confusion. It's starting off, but inevitably, it's not the epic war battle that you would want for Aquaman. Now, granted, I did appreciate, because this is my Aquaman, and I do like this version of Aquaman, the very land going, kind of has roots in the land, and then kind of slowly starts to recognize his Atlantean ties, has mommy issues, that kind of a thing. The drunk, all of the elements were there for me in terms of Aquaman. But I don't know, is he really a half brother? Because obviously they shared the same mother. I didn't care for the villain. I didn't care for that
Yeah.
storyline. I didn't care for the conclusion of the storyline. I thought it was very weak. I did appreciate the ending of it, how he kind of rose to power and accepted responsibility for who he was and kind of took Mara at his side. I did think Mara was the strongest character in this
Yeah, she was.
entire film. I really give her a lot of credit because I don't think Mara gets a lot of credit, unfortunately, because of Amber Heard. She gets a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
hate now.
Yeah.
But that aside, she was a comic character before she was a live character. So I think that for that, we really need to remember who she is to Aquaman and the strength that she gives him. She's constantly reminding him who he is and why he's there and what he's fighting for. And I think you really do see that cohesively from start to finish. She's not only watching over him as he's trying to make a connection to Atlantis, but she's also rooting for him the whole time, and she's his number one warrior in the battle. But in terms of the whole battle itself, it was really quite forgettable. I did like Cyborg's development, because his character did develop a little bit more in terms of releasing the other elements of his humanity and becoming more of a machine. And I liked that. I liked it. I guess kind of in the last two films, in both War and this film, we got to really just see the full evolution of Cyborg and his backstory and his disdain for his father, and all his drive and his heart. He has a really big heart too, and you definitely see that in these films. um but yeah, not the best Aquaman story,
Well, you want
but
to know what's really
they're
interesting?
not all going to be
You
winners.
know what's really interesting? You can see practically the exact same story done so much better in the live action Aquaman film. That's one of the few things that I will say. And again, the thing of, I mean, when you saw the post-credit scene in Justice League War and you see the submarine rise and you see Ocean Master, that's the thing. They never use his supervillain name in these movies. It's Ocean Master. Orm, we know his name is Orm, but Ocean Master is his supervillain name. We know Aquaman is coming, and that's what makes everybody excited. Aquaman gets there. Yes, we see that he's depressed because his father just died. He's got to man the lighthouse. Of course, you get a couple of lighthearted bits like when they actually named the whole of the Justice League the Super Seven, and they were like saying, "Oh God, please change that." Like that was just really, really funny. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's really nothing more that I can say because you really hit all the right nails on the head. It's got some good action. I personally like the voice of Matt Lanter voicing Aquaman. I loved that because I didn't like the voice of Green Lantern in Justice League War, and then they got Nathan Fillion to come back, and just such a breath of fresh air. I love Nathan Fillion voicing Green Lantern. And the truth of the matter is, Nathan Fillion loves voicing Green Lantern. The fact that Nathan Fillion is not necessarily going to be Hal Jordan in the live action Superman movie, but he will be a Green Lantern. Been a long time coming, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, I hated the Ocean Master in this movie. Black Manta, who is so much more of a threat in the world of Aquaman, how they just made him Orm's lackey only when he is originally going to say that I'm the reason why Orm did this. I'm the one that manipulated him. He's dead.
Yeah,
That was
that
funny.
was so
I will
weak.
definitely say that was funny.
Well, it was funny, but it was weak. It was sad. I was like, really? That's it? That's what we get? No, I was kind of disappointed. That was his storyline.
Yeah, and then at the end of it, based on this mission, when you get to the end of this movie, the Justice League is actually saying, maybe we do need to start thinking about this team a little bit more. And they basically say to Green Lantern, you better be at these meetings. And they said we could use Aquaman's help too. And so Aquaman says, I'm in. And then they give him the superhero name, saying they're calling him Aquaman. And he goes, I hate that name. And then Green Lantern goes, Aquaman it is. Like, I thought that was really funny. But
It was.
yeah. And then we get a very unusual post-credit scene at the end of this movie. Orm is in prison, then all of a sudden Lex Luthor shows up. So I'm sure you
That's
got
always a
excited
good
about
day.
that. But
That's always a good day. Yeah, I of course I did. Yeah.
so
Anytime Luther's on the scene, it's gonna be made for a good segue.
yeah, I think that we've pretty much gotten everything out there that we needed to. Yeah, it's still fun to watch these movies as a whole. And the truth of the matter is, nothing is really perfect. I mean, when we officially get to the end of this new 52 storyline, we'll talk about everything as a whole and what we liked and what we didn't like about it. But I guess my final question to you is, how do you feel now that you've seen all three of these movies? And how do you feel about venturing forward within this um New 52 animated saga.
Well, once we've begun, we must press forward. So, this is just the beginning. And you don't always have a strong beginning, but I'm pretty sure there's somewhere along the way that I'm going to love this. And it's just the experience. I love to venture into any layer, any facet of the DC world and just experience it for what the creators have created. It might not always be my cup of tea, but it's always great to kind of see different storylines, different vantage points of characters, different interactions between characters because it makes for breaking up the monotony. I mean, who wants to see the same things all the time? So this was fun.
Well, yeah. So my last question is, did you notice the very, very subtle cameo of a person who was eventually going to become a hero in these three, I believe it was in Justice League War? Did you
Probably
recognize the black construction worker holding the big hammer?
I did not.
Do you know who that was? They called him Henry, as in Henry Irons, who would eventually become the superhero known as Steel.
I missed that. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
I like it.
And remind yourself about that character. He will be back in these films. So just be ready
Nice.
for that.
All right.
Right,
Looking
so that's
forward.
going to wrap up a DC animated live show. I'm really glad that we're revisiting these films because these are some of these films that I haven't really watched in a while. And it's kind of funny because of the fact that I just went to see Thunderbolts, and now that the MCU Phase 5 is officially over, I was saying to myself, I kind of want to rewatch those films too. So I'm like sort of like really in a superhero movie mode right now. So I'm sort of excited to go and venture back into some of those movies as well. Although, based on where we are right now with the MCU, if you want to really start at the beginning, I think these days you have to start with the 1998 film Blade and work your way up just because of what they've done thanks to Deadpool. But anyway, this is a DC show, not a Marvel show. And thank you very much for watching. Leave your comments in the box below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Cami and I will be back soon with another one of these videos, along with a couple of other treats as well. We've got more Ice Cream Man coming. We've got more flashback videos coming, and a couple of other discussions that we definitely have in the works. So in the meantime, we will see you in the next one.